Adrian Newey just made the most shocking admission in Formula One history. The Aston Martin AMR26 is so undrivable that Fernando Alonso can't complete more than 25 laps without risking permanent nerve damage to his hands. Lance Stroll can't do more than 15 laps. The vibrations are so severe that Stroll compared it to electrocuting yourself in a chair. And this revelation came less than 48 hours before the Australian Grand Prix. Speaking at a packed press conference in the Albert Park paddock on Thursday morning, Newey laid bare the catastrophic problems Aston Martin is facing. The Honda power unit vibrations aren't just causing reliability issues, they're literally destroying the driver's hands through the steering wheel. That vibration into the chassis is causing a few reliability problems. Mirrors falling off, tail lights falling off, all that sort of thing which we are having to address, Newey told media in Melbourne. But the much more significant problem with that is that vibration is transmitted ultimately into the driver's fingers. Then came the bombshell that left the paddock stunned. Fernando is of the feeling that he can't do more than 25 laps consecutively before he will risk permanent nerve damage to his hands, Newey said. Lance is of the opinion that he can't do more than 15 laps before that threshold. 25 laps. 15 laps. The Australian Grand Prix is 58 laps. That means Aston Martin cannot complete the race distance without putting their drivers at serious health risk. Newey confirmed what everyone suspected. We're going to have to be very heavily restricted on how many laps we do in the race until we get on top of the source of the vibration and improve the vibration at source. This is unprecedented in modern Formula One, a team principal admitting before the season opener that his drivers physically cannot finish the race without risking permanent injury. Not mechanical failure, not strategy, physical harm to the drivers' bodies from simply holding the steering wheel. Lance Stroll described the sensation in visceral terms. The vibrations feel like electrocuting yourself in a chair, according to the Canadian driver. That's not just uncomfortable, that's painful, that's dangerous. And Aston Martin is sending both drivers out to race in Melbourne, knowing the car is causing them physical harm. Subscribe now because this Aston Martin disaster is about to unfold in Melbourne. Help us hit 10,000. The root cause is Honda's power unit. Abnormal vibrations from the engine are destroying the battery pack, which forced Honda to run out of spare parts during Bahrain testing. Aston Martin completed just 329 laps across 6 days of testing, barely more than Cadillac's 266 laps, and Cadillac is a brand new team with a year-old Ferrari engine. Fernando Alonso's longest consecutive stint in testing was 23 laps before the engine failed catastrophically on the penultimate day. That breakdown ended Aston Martin's running for the remainder of that session. The final day of testing? Lance Stroll managed just 6 installation laps before Honda called it quits, citing a shortage of components. Honda has identified the problem as vibrations from the V6 engine and possibly the MGU system. These vibrations are so severe that they're shaking the battery pack violently enough to cause damage. The Japanese manufacturer worked around the clock at their Sakura facility between testing and Australia to develop countermeasures, but there's no guarantee those fixes will work. Koji Watanabe, president of Honda Racing Corporation, admitted as much on Thursday. We will introduce countermeasures what we believe to be the most effective solution at this stage starting this week, Watanabe said. However, its effectiveness cannot yet be fully guaranteed in real track conditions, so certain conditions will be applied to power unit operation this week. Translation: Honda has no idea if their fix will work. They tested it on the dyno and it reduced vibrations going into the battery, but the dyno isn't the real world. Friday practice will be the first time they discover if the solution actually works or if Aston Martin is facing an even bigger disaster than they already know about. The vibrations aren't just affecting the battery and the drivers. Mirrors are falling off, tail lights are coming loose, components are literally shaking apart from the car during running. The AMR26 is shedding parts like a car that's been driven over a bomb crater, except this is happening on smooth tarmac at testing facilities. Newey explained the mechanical problem in stark terms. The power unit, the combination of the ICE and possibly the MGU as well, is the source of the vibration. It's the amplifier. The chassis is, in that scenario, the receiver. A carbon chassis is a naturally stiff structure with very little damping, so the transmission of that vibration into the chassis we haven't made any progress on. That's the nightmare scenario for Aston Martin. The problem originates in Honda's engine. The solution requires changes to the power unit. But power units are homologated for 2026, meaning major design changes aren't allowed without FIA permission. Honda can implement reliability fixes, but if the vibration issue is fundamental to the engine architecture, there might not be an easy solution. Reports suggest Adrian Newey's ultra-aggressive chassis design contributed to the problem. Newey pushed for extremely tight packaging and low placement of components to optimize aerodynamics. Honda reportedly requested reinforcement to the chassis structure to help dissipate vibrations, but those requests were rejected because adding reinforcement would compromise the car's performance characteristics. The carbon fiber monocoque is designed to be stiff with minimal damping. That's perfect for aerodynamic efficiency and structural rigidity, but it's terrible for absorbing vibrations. Every shake from the engine gets transmitted directly through the chassis into the steering wheel and into the driver's hands. Fernando Alonso downplayed the concerns publicly, showing the mental toughness that's defined his career. The vibrations coming from the engine are hurting a little bit, the components on the car, and, the drivers, Alonso said. But I think any adrenaline can overcome the pain. That's classic Alonso, willing to drive through anything to compete. But overcoming the pain doesn't change the medical reality. Prolonged exposure to severe vibrations causes nerve damage. It's not about toughness or pain tolerance, it's about permanent injury to hands that need to function for the rest of his life. Lance Stroll was more direct about the discomfort. It's a very uncomfortable vibration and it's bad for the engine, but also the human inside the car, Stroll said. The comparison to electrocution wasn't hyperbole, it was an accurate description of what it feels like when your hands are being subjected to constant, violent shaking through the steering wheel. The timing of Newey's admission is remarkable. This press conference happened on Thursday morning in Melbourne. First practice is Friday, qualifying is Saturday. The race is Sunday. Aston Martin showed up to the season opener, knowing their car is undrivable for race distance, and publicly admitted it 48 hours before lights out. That's not sandbagging. That's not managing expectations. That's a team in crisis with no immediate solution and no choice but to be transparent about the severity of their problems. Speculation before the Australian GP suggested Aston Martin might start the race and retire both cars after a handful of laps to avoid penalties for not starting. The Concord Agreement requires teams to participate in races, and skipping Australia entirely would trigger massive financial penalties. But retiring early due to mechanical issues is allowed. Newey shut down that speculation directly. Aston Martin isn't planning a premeditated start and park strategy, but the reality is both cars probably won't finish the race anyway. Not because the team plans to retire them, but because the drivers physically can't continue without risking permanent injury. The race is 58 laps. Alonso can do 25 laps maximum before nerve damage becomes a concern. Stroll can do 15 laps. Even if Aston Martin splits those stints across the race with pit stops, the cumulative exposure to vibrations will eventually cross the threshold where it becomes medically dangerous. Honda's countermeasures for Australia involve running the engine in a restricted mode to protect the battery and reduce vibrations. That means the AMR26 won't be running at full performance. The car that looked 4 seconds off the pace in testing will be even slower in Melbourne because Honda has to detune the engine to prevent it from destroying itself. The performance implications are massive. Aston Martin was already the slowest team in testing alongside Cadillac. Now they're showing up to Australia with an engine that's deliberately restricted, a chassis that's shedding components, and drivers who can't complete race distance without health risks. Lawrence Stroll invested hundreds of millions of dollars to bring Adrian Newey, Andy Cowell, and Enrico Cardile to Aston Martin. The vision was to create a technical dream team capable of winning championships. Instead, they're showing up to the first race of the new regulation era, unable to finish without injuring their drivers. Newey remained optimistic despite the chaos. He believes the AMR26 has development potential and could be competitive at some point this season once the vibration issues are resolved. But he couldn't provide a timeline for when that might happen, because Honda hasn't identified the root cause. "We can't rule out the possibility of this dragging on," Watanabe admitted. "The problem isn't isolated to one component. Multiple parts are interacting to generate the vibrations. Fixing the transmission might not solve it. Fixing the engine mounting might not solve it. This could be a fundamental issue with how Honda designed the power unit architecture. The broader implications for Aston Martin's season are catastrophic. Pre-season testing is when teams accumulate data, understand their car's behavior, optimize setup windows, and build confidence. Aston Martin completed 2,111 kilometers in testing. Mercedes completed over 6,100 kilometers. That's less than half the mileage of the benchmark team. Without data, Aston Martin doesn't know what the AMR26 is truly capable of. They don't know if Newey's aggressive design philosophy will pay off once the reliability issues are solved. They're heading into Australia essentially blind, hoping to survive practice sessions and gather information while managing a car that's physically harming the drivers. The Australian Grand Prix could mark the start of a turnaround if Honda's fixes work, or it could be the beginning of a season-long nightmare if the vibrations persist. Friday practice will tell the story. If Alonso and Stroll complete normal length runs without issues, there's hope. If the vibrations are still severe enough to cause discomfort after 15 to 25 laps, Aston Martin is facing a crisis with no immediate solution. The paddock is watching this situation with a mix of shock and sympathy. Nobody wants to see drivers put at physical risk. Nobody wants to see a partnership between Aston Martin and Honda, two storied names in motorsport, fail so catastrophically out of the gate. But the facts are undeniable. Adrian Newey admitted his drivers can't finish the Australian Grand Prix without risking permanent nerve damage. Lance Stroll compared the vibrations to electrocution. Fernando Alonso is relying on adrenaline to overcome pain that could cause lasting injury. Honda doesn't know if their fixes will work, and the race is 48 hours away. This is the most shocking start to a Formula One season in modern history, not because of on-track drama or championship controversy, but because a team showed up to round one with a car that's medically unsafe to drive for race distance. The AMR26 isn't just slow, it's undrivable, and Aston Martin just admitted it to the world. Melbourne will reveal whether Honda's countermeasures work or whether Aston Martin is staring down the barrel of a disastrous season. Either way, the fact that we're even having this conversation 48 hours before the season opener tells you everything about how badly things have gone wrong for Adrian Newey's first Aston Martin.